Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Monta. I'm the Associate Director of the Nanovic Institute for European Studies. Welcome to the beginning film of the film series this semester, which is The Spirit of 1968. The reason this semester's films are concentrating on this is that at the end, there are two main reasons. One, at the end of the semester, there's a wonderful conference that the Institute is organizing together with the Kellogg Institute for International Studies here at Notre Dame, and it's called 1968 in Europe and Latin America. And that will eventually turn into a wonderful book, and we're very excited about that. But we thought in order to prepare people for that and for all of the other events, which are terrific, happening all across the semester, we wanted to show some films. And the second reason is that this is the last semester that Jim McAdams will be director of the Nanovic Institute, and he told me, in no uncertain terms, can we finally have some films about rock and roll? And so how can you say no? So this is that series. I want to begin, though, by expressing some trepidation. So the Monterey International Pop Festival that we're about to see, organized as a film by D.A. Pennebaker, and rendered now in 4K glory, so you're going to see the best production of this that you can. It took place on June 16 to 18, 1967, and that was 6 months after I was born. So in making these remarks, I don't have the safety of talking about, events long past that have passed out of living memory. Some of you may have been at this festival, or some of you may have known people at this festival, or some of you may even recall this festival if your memory of the festival is not too hazy. But there are people younger than me here. I wrote that, and then I thought, surely there's going to be somebody younger than me here. I'm not sure that's the case. And it's to them that I'm going to gear these remarks. Okay, so as somebody looking back on the 60s, and who, in the words of Jim McAdams, just missed all the good stuff. So, although the title of our film is The Spirit of 68, I believe the late 60s are still very much with us because the technical means of rendering it via media, the recording industry, print, Rolling Stone, for example, began 6 months after this festival, and of course films, were commensurate with the scale of its artistic production, such that even now we can listen with the click of a mouse or the swipe of a finger nearly every recording or film ever made during those years. And yes, we can still listen to 78s from the 30s and big band recordings and obscure blues records from the 50s and rockabilly, but the music of the boomers, the 60s, Kennedy versus Nixon on TV, the massive concerts, the Beatlemania, the scale of all of that was really huge, much bigger than before. And now, as an aside, this is a little dangerous to say in front of this audience, but it's we know these figures so well, they've been so represented in such detail that when they start to pass in increasing numbers, it is sort of feeling like a mass extinction event. In American pop culture, there's this really huge sense that these are figures that we've all grown up with, so they're kind of like family. Now, Pennebaker was part of that whole technological development. He was a graduate of MIT. He modded his own cameras so that he could hold them, and they would still be synced to sound. I don't know how exactly that works, but that was innovative at the time. He was involved in bringing techniques of photojournalism into cinema as part of this movement called direct cinema. And all of that was very congruent with the subject matter of the film. It's about getting down among the crowd, among the people, to participate in that. And he was 41 years old at the time. He was hired by John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas. They had the #1 album the year before. And he was organizing this festival to take place just south of San Francisco, south of the Bay Area, on the county fairgrounds, which had an arena that you'll see in the film that could seat about 7,500 people. They packed more and more in. And around which is now a golf course. Phillips didn't act alone. The festival had to be incorporated. And I'm sorry if I geek out a little bit on the administration of this, but it interested me that he had a board of governors for the festival. And that board of governors included the likes of Donovan, Mick Jagger, Paul Simon, imagine the meetings, Smokey Robinson, Roger McGuinn, Brian Wilson, and Paul McCartney. So while some people in the music business felt that the festival was staging a kind of regional rivalry between Bay Area bands and Los Angeles bands, the direction of the festival was not only regional but international. And that shouldn't be a surprise, because this was 67. This is after Beatlemania, the British invasion. And if we look at the list of performers in the festival, we'll find musicians from the UK, The Who, Eric Burdon and the Animals, Beverly. I don't know who remembers Beverly, but we should remember Beverly. India, Ravi Shankar on Sunday morning. Canada, Buffalo Springfield, the band was backing someone up I can't recall at the time. And South Africa with Hugh Masekela. Rest in peace, he just passed. But it could have been even more international. The Beatles were invited, but they declined. They recommended Hendrix and The Who. The Kinks couldn't get a visa. And that was for not colorful reasons. The two invitations that to people who couldn't get visas, who were very famous, the Stones and Donovan, couldn't get visas because they were busted for drug possession before. Frank Zappa was invited, Jim, but he declined because he declined to appear with San Francisco bands that he considered were just inferior. So to compare this lineup with the list of performers from the Monterey Pop Festival last year, the sort of 50-year anniversary festival, there were only two from outside the U.S. Eric Burdon came, and Regina Spektor. And that's a sort of argument, because Regina Spektor was born in Moscow, but she moved here with her parents when she was 9 years old, and she stayed. So when we look at the International Pop Festival here in 67, we might say, this is great. This was a widening of America's ears, openness to the world beyond its borders. But in fact, there was a fair bit of that going on already. Like I said, there was Beatlemania, the British invasion. But on the Billboard charts just before this festival, I want to share a couple of names with you. Engelbert Humperdinck. Does anybody know where he was from? He was born in India. The Hollies, the Tremolos, the Dave Clark Five. I hope these are household names. These were great bands. They were from the UK. And the Easy Beats were from Australia. So that's about a quarter of the pop charts there, the singles. And on the album chart, there was a bit of exoticism in the soundtracks to Dr. Zhivago and a French film called A Man and a Woman. I don't know if you remember that. And as well as Sinatra's pretty classicizing record when he was codifying the songs of Antonio Carlos Jobim. So he released a record of Jobim's music as American standards, jazz standards. And arguably the international nature of the festival itself, I want to sort of emphasize this, the international nature of the festival worked to open America's ears more fully to itself. The blues influence in music, American soul music. This festival launched the career of Otis Redding, Jimi Hendrix. So the international angle of the festival was certainly present, shouldn't be totally overemphasized. But what happened here was not only, America opening its ears to itself, but also, let me just throw out a couple of things to watch for. The 60s was about bursting these restraints and these conventions and boundaries. And it's interesting to me in looking back, and I wasn't part of it, but it looks to me like vaudeville in a way. But it's vaudeville on a huge scale. This is about amplification. It's about big crowds. And the purpose of the variety show really shifts from, you can imagine yourself in a vaudeville, watching a vaudeville show, and it's kind of entertaining, and there's ironic detachment and stuff. In the 60s, it seems that these concerts are more about enacting something. Not in the way a vaudeville show does, but the audience is part of enacting something really big. It becomes socially symbolic of some new way of being. And the performers become sort of totemic. we now look back on Hendrix and Janis Joplin and Otis Redding, and they have these kind of, they become examples of new ways, new self-fashionings that people then sort of affine themselves with. So the rejection of the authority that the 60s was really about in a lot of ways also abhors a vacuum. And so there's a search for new authorities or new exemplars. And that we see in such iconic fashion here in the work of Pennebaker. So, just to say the last thing, this is the beginning of the Summer of Love in 1967. But it was also, I think, a moment of enormously creative destruction. And that paradox is really alive and very vivid here. The kinds of things that you'll hear, the kinds of things that you'll see are new and exciting and loud, but there's burning guitars and smashed drum sets and things, and there's a lot of energy here that's, I think, captured by this phrase, creative destruction. So I know you're going to enjoy it, but enjoy it even more in this format. Thank you.